paid role? No. Humble? No. Risk averse? No. I don't want 200. I don't want 500. Satisfied with less? Entrepreneurship at the end of the day is, I would say, is a personality trait. Biggest change is being okay with uncertainty.
Nima, thank you so much for joining Between Meetings. Welcome to Between Meetings. I'm really excited to have you on the show.
No, thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here. Very stoked. Super looking forward to this conversation.
Awesome. So usually we kick off with the background. So where did you study? What did you study? And how did you first join Innovate Calgary?
I went to school for a very long time. I started off with my undergrad here at the University of Calgary in biochemistry. Didn't love the program, so I switched over to a genetics undergrad at the U of A. Liked that a lot, ended up staying in kind of the genetics field and did my master's at the U of A, and then ultimately came back down to Calgary to do my PhD. And so that's kind of my academic background. My PhD was in medical genetics in the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Calgary, and really focused on developmental biology, not a lot of translational research. But how did I end up at Innovate Calgary is, as I was finishing off my PhD, the reality was that job prospects for someone with a PhD in genetics weren't fantastic. So I thought, okay, well, why don't I start volunteering at Innovate Calgary as an intern, just to pad my resume a bit, distinguish myself away from some of the other PhDs so I had a better job chances. And so I started volunteering at Innovate Calgary, and that's kind of how I got my foot in the door.
You've been with Innovate Calgary for over already 12 years. I checked your LinkedIn profile.
Mm-hmm.
So back then when you started as an intern, did you ever imagine that it would become your professional home for over a decade?
No, I was just thought I'd come into Innovate Calgary just to put something on my resume other than a PhD. And as you know, I really actually came in more on the energy side, which wasn't my educational background at all. But at the time, the University of Calgary was launching its Eyes High strategy, and the energy pillar was the first pillar that they were launching. So I started supporting that, trying to profile researchers at the university in that sector. Ultimately, when that project came to a completion, they actually offered me a 1 day a week, while I was still doing my PhD, 1 day a week paid role. And so I started doing that for a while. And then as I defended my thesis and once I graduated, they offered me a full-time role. And then slowly over time, I transitioned from the energy sector to where my actual expertise was, which is in the life sciences sector. And so started off on the tech transfer team, doing a lot of life sciences, intellectual property assessments, licensing deals, a lot of marketing, and of course trying to educate University of Calgary researchers on intellectual property topics. And then ultimately ended up transitioning and moving up to lead the life sciences team at Innovate Calgary, and then ultimately the whole tech transfer team. And then from there, that was kind of the first half of my time at Innovate Calgary. From there, we were just about to launch the Life Sciences Innovation Hub. So I was one of maybe 2-3 people that helped put together the hub. And I was on the kind of developing the programming and literally doing everything. So ordering the equipment, coming up with the programming, coming up with the rules, like hiring all the people, ordering the equipment, everything, eventually where I am today.
Well, it's not that uncommon that people stay with the companies for a long time, but usually it happens in like a bigger corporates where you have like a really, really long career ladder that you can climb for years and years, right? But in the space that we work with, it's very dynamic, lots of changes, people come, people go, but you manage to stay. That's really exciting. So that gives you a lot of interesting insights into the ecosystem because you've been watching it's growing. So if we speak about the ecosystem, I think 10 years ago, or even 50 years ago, it was very different, and challenges the ecosystem faced likely different from what it is now today. So what are the 3 biggest shifts or changes have you witnessed in the ecosystem?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even kind of commenting on how long I've been at Innovate Calgary, absolutely. In fact, of the time that I've spent at Innovate Calgary, I'm probably one of the longest serving people at the organization. And it's been interesting. It's been an interesting experience because I've seen the organization change. I've seen the innovation ecosystem change. You know, when I started at Innovate Calgary, there was really only Innovate Calgary and Startup Calgary and just literally two organizations that supported entrepreneurs. I mean, CDL was there for sure. And it was, actually CDL wasn't there at the time. When I started at Innovate Calgary, CDL came up a little bit later than that. But in that time, there has just been so much activity that has developed within the city to support startups. Right now, if you look at the Calgary Innovation Coalition memberships, I think there's over 50 organizations that are dedicated to supporting early stage companies. So it's been really great to see the city grow and provide that support. And we've seen the outputs of all of that activity as well. Like we've seen companies come up, we've seen the whole ecosystem grow, we've seen this, a lot of entrepreneurs who have actually now perhaps exited a company and are now starting their second company. So that support has really paid off and has put Calgary on the map. And it's not just within Alberta, but internationally. It's now being seen more and more as a tech-focused area. And that kind of the support that we have for those early stage founders has really made a difference, I would say.
There are definitely lots of changes happened, and the ecosystem is still evolving, still growing. So where the opportunities and challenges lie at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the past decade or so, we've done a really good job at that early stage support. We have a lot of organizations, Innovate Calgary, Platform Calgary, that are probably the two largest ones in the city, supporting those early stage founders. And we've been able to create a mass of early stage companies that are now have matured and are getting to that next stage. And I think that's kind of where the gap is right now, is we have a lot of supports for that early stage, but for that scaling stage, we're lacking kind of VC capital for that stage. A lot of our seed funds are really quite small, and we don't have a lot of funds that participate in Series A, Series B, Series C, in Canada in general, but certainly in Calgary. But those scaling companies also need a different mentality and a different set of mentorship. It's not just developing your product, building a very small team, running lean, and just getting something out onto the market. Now you have a completely different set of needs: marketing, business development, building relationships so that you can actually scale the company and expand your sales. So I think we could definitely use some support there in the city, and that later stage capital is certainly useful in developing that, because I think if we don't do that, we stand the risk of putting all this investment into these early stage companies that then don't have the resources they need to get to that next stage, and then move on and go to a different city, and then we lose out on that opportunity.
Lots of work needs to be done, definitely. Coming from an academic background and working with hundreds of research-based entrepreneurs in different capacities over all these years, what it takes for the researcher to become a successful entrepreneur, what qualities or traits help that transition make happen?
I would say kind of the biggest change is being okay with uncertainty. I think academics in particular, before they're able to make a statement of like, oh, this is the way things are, or before they can take action, often need a lot of information. And if they prove something one way, they're going to go back and test it 10 different times to make sure that what they're claiming is absolutely true, can't be disputed, so that they can publish it. And that's the rigor with which scientific research is expected to approach questions. Whereas I think entrepreneurship is a little bit different in that many times you're forced to make decisions without all the information. You have incomplete information, you have sometimes even incorrect information, and you're forced to make a decision. And I think that can be really challenging for a lot of academic entrepreneurs who are used to a certain level of rigor. So I think being able to deal with that uncertainty, being able to move in that gray space, I think really distinguishes the really successful entrepreneurs that come from academia. And of course, speed. Like academia doesn't move quickly, startups do. And so being able to keep up with that pace and getting things done, working overnight, like really like moving at the pace of startups can be a challenge, certainly for a lot of academics. And I think between those two things, and of course the cultural bit of it as well, like being able to tolerate risk and getting out there and executing on whatever that vision is you have for your startup.
So what are the best tactics or ways to overcome those kind of barriers?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's some of it is personality, and it can be challenging to change your personality. Like entrepreneurship, at the end of the day, is a personality trait, and it's not for everybody. And we can't expect every academic, and we don't want every academic to be an entrepreneur. You have to really want it, and you have to be able to tolerate some of the things that I said. I mean, some of the best academic entrepreneurs I've worked with have been those who, one, are coachable. I mean, coachability is something we talk about frequently, and what I see sometimes from academics is, almost all academics are brilliant people. They're very, very smart. They're subject matter experts in their field. And some think they're subject matter experts in every field. And so that becomes a coachability issue, because it's really hard to convince them that, okay, you know a lot about your subject, but you actually don't know a lot about on the business side. So when you're talking to advisors, when you're talking to people who've been there and done that, make sure you're listening to that advice. And you're going to get 10 different pieces of advice, many of them conflicting with one another. And there is some level of filtering that you have to do. But those who I've worked with that I've found to be most successful are those who are humble, and they can take that advice and admit that maybe they don't know what they're doing and move on. And the least successful ones are the ones that come in and like, what, this is the best idea in the world. We just need like $10 million to develop this, and everyone's going to buy it. And you do the market research, you do the customer discovery, and you can demonstrate to them that's not the case, but they refuse to listen. And sometimes we're wrong. Like it's not always that we know exactly what's going to work and what's not, because if we had that kind of power, we'd all be millionaires, because we'd be investing in all the right companies. But there's certainly evidence that you can look to and to try and make as informed of a decision as you can. So when you provide that kind of advice and feedback to people, it becomes a personality thing of how coachable you are, how much you're willing to listen to somebody. So, you can certainly change your coachability, you can be more open, but I think it's just a person-to-person trait.
We see that Calgary startup ecosystem is booming. People talk about it. There's momentum, definitely. But if you look at the national scale, then it's been already for a few years that Canada has been slipping in the global rankings. Despite all the investment that goes into the innovation, the results not always followed. What do you think are the biggest challenges, and how we can overcome those barriers?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it's something that a lot of people have been tackling. I mean, it's something that a lot of people have noticed for sure as a gap in Canada. And I think, like you said, we have a lot of the pieces of the puzzle to be successful. We have excellent academic institutions that are producing awesome research, they're producing awesome talent, and there's a lot of public funding that goes into Canadian academic institutions. It's that translation piece that's lacking. And again, I think part of the issue goes back to culture. Within all academic institutions, of course, translation sometimes hits cultural roadblocks. But I think in Canada in particular, we're a population of pretty risk-averse people, and entrepreneurship at its core is taking risk. And so having the founders really be able to be comfortable with taking risk, but also the capital in the country needs to be okay with that. We need patient capital that can invest in these early stage big ideas that have potentially a very high failure rate. But I think Canadian investors also tend to be quite risk averse and only invest in like sure bets. And sure, yeah, you'll probably get better returns on those sure bets in the short term. But that's not really what's going to drive the ecosystem and those unicorns and billion-dollar ideas that are out there, without having people who are just willing to just bet on a crazy idea that may work, may not work. And so definitely see more of that in the United States, where people are more willing to accept those kinds of risks. And even our public funding system is not really tailored to fund projects that are very, very high risk. It's just not, the system isn't set up for that. And I think another issue is, because we have the United States and the South, as soon as we have a company that has potential and looks like they're doing really, really well, they get acquired. They have big dollars in there, and our founders are like, well, there's an opportunity, bird in the hand kind of thing. There's an opportunity in front of me, and someone's offering me $100 million, $500 million for my company that I started. I'm happy to take that. I'm okay with that level of money, because if I hold on to it, sure, it may be more valuable in the future, but it might be less valuable. What happens in those situations is that when those companies get acquired, we lose out on that potential. But we also lose on building those anchor companies that stay within Canada. And those anchor companies are the ones that spawn talent. They're the ones that spawn new ideas. They're the ones that spawn kind of even that executive level talent who's been with the company from the beginning to bring it up to that next stage. And so without that critical mass of talent and ideas coming out from these established unicorns that stayed in Canada, it becomes harder and harder to be successful. And I think, being just north of the United States certainly has its benefits for us, but it's easy for them to poach all of our good ideas, and then we lose out. Again, similar to that, we lose out on that early stage investment. And that early stage investment sometimes is the highest risk investment, even though it's not quite as big. And anything with any kind of potential just gets poached.
Interesting. So you mentioned that people in the US and also in many other countries, right? So they're willing to take more risk, right? So I feel like sometimes entrepreneurs just hungry, right? They want to hustle more. So why in Canada people not pretty much everyone is willing to take a risk and go extra mile?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I feel like maybe it's not that we're not as hungry in terms of as motivated and driven, but I feel like we're not as motivated by money in the same way that maybe people in the US and other countries are. Like if someone says, just using my previous example, I'll buy your company for $100 million. Like, you know what? That's enough money. I'll be comfortable for the rest of my life. I don't want 200. I don't want 500. Right. 100 million is enough for me. And I think because of that, because we're not I don't necessarily want to say that's a bad thing, because I don't think we should necessarily be motivated by greed to just get bigger and bigger in this model of infinite growth and just try and get more money than you possibly could ever use in your lifetime. And we see that with many of the billionaires in the US. They couldn't possibly use the money that they have in their lifetime. But I think that also means that we're satisfied with less, and that by correlation will mean that we're not as driven to make the biggest companies and make billions of dollars, because we're okay.
You have all the connections that lots of people want. You have the resources, you have worked with a number of companies. So have you ever thought about starting your own business?
I have thought about many times. I've come pretty close. But I think, even actually, I was almost about to start my own company right before COVID hit. And I think, again, just because COVID hit, I was like, oh, this is really a good time to be leaving a secure job to start a startup company. And I think over the years, maybe just learning myself better, that I feel like maybe I'm not the best entrepreneur. Maybe I am not willing to accept risk as much as an entrepreneur should. I have no shortage of cool startup ideas over the years, but I've never really executed on them. And if I really reflect back as to why, I think it's because, maybe entrepreneurship is not in my bones. Although I've certainly learned a lot about it, and I can certainly talk about it. I'm not sure if I would ever have my own startup per se.
But never say never.
Never said, yeah, I mean, it's possible. I'm not ruling it out completely. And maybe if exactly the right opportunity came by and I saw something that is lower risk, I would run with it. Because, yeah, most of the ideas I've had have been very, very high risk ideas. And I'm going to say there's definitely an element of it that appeals to me. Like, I can see myself doing it eventually, maybe.
Well, I look forward to that. Nima, thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for your insight. And thank you so much for being very supportive all this year, contributing to the ecosystem and making Calgary the place that everyone is talking now about. Entrepreneurship and innovation and technology is booming. And I really look forward to the next steps.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for all the work that you do. I mean, you certainly help build the community in Calgary around startups, and things like this podcast really do make a difference as you profile and highlight different people and different activities. So thank you, and thank you for having me on the show.